Hey guys, welcome back to Token Tech. Today I want to talk about things that have finally clicked for me when it comes to Ryzen 3000. So as a lot of you know, I've made quite a few videos covering Ryzen 3000 and the temperatures that they seem to have. Okay, a lot of us know that their temperatures have been kind of high. The idle temps can spike to be relatively high, and it's something we're just not really used to. Now in this video I'm going to talk about why it's basically okay and things we can do to make our lives a little bit better when talking about these CPUs. Now, for starters, I just want to recap real quick. I've made videos about undervolting, about setting a stock voltage, and kind of setting a stock clock speed, and considering that to be overclocking. Now, while I don't deny those videos or think that they're wrong, I do want to just make it clear that setting a static voltage, you don't want to go above 1.3 volts, and really you want to stay around 1.25 or below. Okay, now I was running mine at 1.25, and I have no issues, no types of degradation in my CPU. But some people have seen degradation between 1.2 and 1.3 volts on their CPU. So you want to be very careful when doing voltage, and it does depend on CPU to CPU. So your CPU might be fine like mine, others might not be. So be careful with that. And really, I honestly think that setting a static voltage should only be used for undervolting and if you're going to go like 1.2 or below. Okay, and that should really be reserved for cases that have bad airflow or for small form factor PCs for people who really do need to reduce temperatures. Now, okay, so how about for the rest of us? Well, first off, I just want to talk a little bit about how these CPUs work. Okay, so in GPUs for quite a while now, they've worked with boosting algorithms. Okay, so they'll take into account many different factors and will boost the graphics card based on those different factors: power limits, load, current, um, voltage, temperatures, things like that, and then probably others that I'm not thinking of to address how much it can push the clocks of the GPUs. Well, with Ryzen 3000, it has a very sensitive algorithm that also boosts the CPU. Now, it takes into consideration all different kinds of things like temperature, load, workloads, voltages, and things like that to boost it up and get the best performance, whether it be single threaded or multi threaded performance. And so this can be very important when understanding how these temperatures work. Now, this has all been outlined for a long time by the community, but finally it clicked for me when I was going through quite a few different coolers and seeing how these chips respond differently to different coolers. Okay, so basically, um, it's always doing some sort of work, something in the background, whether it be a Windows thing or a program you have running in the background or something you're actually doing. And this is causing the CPU to spike in temperature for a fraction of a second while it's boosting up its performance. Okay. Now, this fraction of a second of hitting a hotter speed in the 60 degrees Celsius, let's say, isn't really dangerous. It's only for a fraction of a second. Now, if you're getting 95 degrees Celsius or hotter for a sustained time period, now that's something you want to look into. There might be something going wrong with your case, with your cooler, or with your chip. Okay, so you want to double check that. But if you're seeing spikes from like 35 or 40 degrees up to 55 or 60, well, that's kind of how these CPUs work with how they boost. Okay, now again, this can be a little worrisome because they're not really used to things working this way, and it can be annoying because your fan speed might be boosting up, causing annoying amounts of noise, okay? Which is probably what causes a lot of people to look into this. And we're going to get to that in just a little bit. So that's basically how these CPUs work. And they're very, very temperature dependent. Gamers Nexus showed that when they were using LN2 or liquid nitrogen to show how they can get more and more and more performance by lowering the temperature. Okay. All right. So let's move on. So the next thing I want to talk about is, well, temperature is going to be a big portion of this. And I've seen people on Reddit, on the overclocking subreddit, that have chips just like mine, 3800X, but getting Cinebench R20 scores much lower than mine. And I mean it. Like, I was getting with the stock cooler around 45 to 47,000 points on Cinebench R, not 1,000, 4,700 points on Cinebench R20. Okay, but a lot of these people were getting in the 3,000s, like 3,500 or 3,700. And I'm like, this is kind of crazy. They should be getting a much higher score. Well, it turns out that it comes down to the cooler on the CPU and the airflow. So first thing you want to do if you're seeing temperature or noise issues, check your airflow. Make sure that your case has good airflow. You want to make sure there's a lot of openness to be able to pull in air, right? So like a mesh front or something like that to be able to really pull in cool air. And you want to make sure you have decent exhaust as well. It should not all be intake, and you want to have balanced or slightly negative airflow to get the best temperatures. You want to get rid of that hot air and bring in as much cool air as possible. Again, having a very positive pressure case can be worse for cooling because you're just kind of keeping all of that hot air in there. You want to evacuate the hot air as fast as possible, and you want to pull in cool air as fast as possible as well. So balanced to slightly negative is the best way to go. If that doesn't do the trick for you, which I know for some of you it will, you want to evaluate your CPU cooler. I've done a video on the stock cooler that AMD includes in the box. I don't really like it. It's good enough to get you by. If you really have nothing else, it's good enough to get you by. But it really isn't good enough for performance. It's not good enough for, I would say, long-term use either. Okay, you're going to lose performance because its chip's going to run too hot, and it's going to be loud, and it's going to be annoying, and it's just not that great performance. Now, you might be saying, but it's free. It comes with the CPU, so let's do it. Yeah, okay, but your CPU is going to run really hot, and you're going to lose performance. So you paid for performance, you didn't pay for the cooler, so you'd rather use the crappy cooler and not get all the performance you paid for. That's up to you. So you want to make sure you get a good cooler. Nocto cooler, Be Quiet cooler, any good air cooler will do. A good all-in-one liquid cooler, or if you do a custom liquid cold loop, anything like that will do great and help improve your temperatures and also help give you more performance. Now, something I noticed was when I was using that stock cooler, I was getting on average between 4,500 and maybe 4,700 if I was lucky, but typically around 4,500 Cinebench score. When I put the liquid cooler on here, right, made sure to do it all correct. I took the whole thing apart, put it back together. I was getting close to what my overclock score was. Okay, so that was over 5,000 stock. Just stock settings, everything on auto. Just because I have a better cooler, it was actually boosting to a little bit over 5,000, or boosting up high enough to get a score a little bit over 5,000 in Cinebench R20. That's really good, okay? Now, the temperatures were still in like the mid 70s, so I didn't really see a temperature change, but what I did see was a drastic increase in performance. So that means this CPU is boosting higher and for longer under this scenario than with that little air cooler that comes in the box. Okay, so if you want to get all your performance, that's definitely what you want to do. Okay, now what about the noise? Right, so I already told you how the voltages are safe and how you're going to get the best performance by leaving it on auto and get yourself a good cooler and having good airflow. But maybe your fans are still ramping up and then slowing down and then ramping up and causing annoying amounts of noise, right? Well, one way is to, well, the only way really is to set a custom fan curve. Okay, two ways to do that. One, go into the BIOS and adjust the fans manually, right? That's pretty easy to do. I'm going to be honest. That's probably the easiest thing to do in the BIOS is to adjust your fan curves. But I understand not everybody wants to get into their BIOS. So I'm pretty sure every motherboard manufacturer also releases software that allows you to adjust fan curves from the desktop. I would suggest looking into your motherboard manufacturer, see what software they offer, and downloading that and trying that out to see if that can allow you to set a manual fan curve. If I was going to do that, I would make sure that my CPU fans are running at a decent speed, all the way up until 75 degrees Celsius. And at 75 degrees Celsius, that's when they really kick in to cool down the CPU. The reason behind that is because these CPUs will boost on a lot of different workloads and will hit higher temperatures like 60 or even 65 degrees for a fraction of a second, which you don't need to worry about. Okay? No need to keep boosting up your fans every time your CPU spikes to 55 or 60 degrees Celsius. So what I would do is set a very mild fan curve, almost static, until you hit 70. And then 70, let it ramp up to go pretty fast to cool down the CPU. Because if you're going 70 or above, that's when you really need the cooling performance. But below that, with just spiky temperatures, you don't need to worry about it too much. Also, things like application, mounting pressure and all that stuff, you want to make sure you're doing everything properly to get the best out of your CPU cooler. Okay, and if you really don't want to mess with any of those things, you can actually buy like a fan hub, right? They sell them, and you plug your fans into it, and you can actually set, they usually have a dial on it. You can set the fan speed manually, okay? So if you want to set like a static 60% or something like that, you can do that. Now for me and my fans, this is obviously liquid cooling, so it's a little bit different. I have them set to monitor the motherboard temperature. That's way more consistent than the CPU or the GPU temperature. And so what I have them doing is, because the motherboard usually just kind of zeroes in at about 35 degrees Celsius, I have it set that at motherboard temperature of 35 degrees Celsius, the fans will spin at about 1000 to 1200 RPM, which with this amount of liquid cooling performance is enough to keep both the CPU and GPU fairly cool under load without annoying the crap out of me in terms of noise. Okay, so it's something you might want to look into for your CPU cooler. Mess around with it, see where your noise tolerance is, and see where you can the best what you can do with your CPU cooler. All right. Now, just to recap, just to go over everything, these things boost much more like GPUs, so you want to make sure that you have plenty of cooling headroom, and you should only really undervolt if you're in a constrained situation. All right. Airflow is going to be your number one benefit or factor in this. Making sure that you have really good airflow is how you're going to benefit from it. So double check, make sure you have enough case fans and they're balanced at least in terms of intake and exhaust. Three, you want to make sure you have a good CPU cooler. Get rid of that stock cooler, put on a good CPU cooler. You'll thank me later for it. And make sure that you set a custom fan curve so you don't pull your hair out from the annoying noise. All right. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.